Welcome everyone! Tom here, the Racing Joker of the Racing Joker channel. It's me, your presenter and host, and everything else that has to do with the production of this bootleg Top Gear show. Welcome to episode 3 of the Ice Age. Tonight, we talk about the automotive industry's latest and greatest creations. I try to find out if the 10-speed automatic gearbox ruins the Ford Mustang. I share some cool things I discovered in the aftermarket. I highlight some of the cool things I've seen in the automotive YouTube community. And we find out what happens when you put me in my first supercar. Let's begin. Hello! My name is Tom. You probably already know that. It's episode 3. It would be strange if you didn't know that. But let's start off this episode right with some E46 M3 GTR race car action. Starting up, we got some legitimate M3 GTR onboard footage. Gotta love that P60 B40 engine. Man, I wish they sold it to the public. But, sadly, we're in the dark timeline. But if you're an ordinary person, but with lots of money, you could get something like this. The following clip is of a car built by Fletcher-made horsepower with an S550 B40 with a 4.4 stroker, built by Chris Fletcher, Fletcher-made horsepower himself. It's sequentially shifted, and it's amazing. It is cross-plane, but it's still amazing. Have a listen. Fun fact, that's not a street chassis. That's actually one of the real E46 M3 BMW Motorsport race car chassis. I don't know which one it is. Obviously, that's private information for whoever owns it. But that is probably one of the best M3 GTR replicas out there. You could convert an S65 to flat plane crankshaft, but that's like an extra $15,000 to $20,000. It is possible, though. I've looked into it. I'm probably going to do it, too. But let's begin with the first segment of the show. Lots of new cars have been announced, revealed, have already been put into the market in production, however you want to put it. Lots of cool stuff is happening, and some automotive manufacturers have not decided to cut their balls off and start making a whole bunch of electric vehicles. So let's talk about some of the cool cars that are still being made today. Let's start off with, we got to talk about it, the Ford Mustang GTD. The S650 generation is a little bit of a, let's go with a divisive generation because it really moves away from retro designs. It's much more modern, and it's made to compete with European sports cars now. The GTD being the purest manifestation of that objective, and I think they're going to come very close, if not definitely succeed. Like the S650, we'll talk about that later, but the GTD, which, as far as I understand it, is a road-going version of their race car that they're using in the GTD class, racing class in the IMSA series, a racing series I have talked about in the past. GTD stands for, I think it's Grand Touring Daytona, something like that. And GTD does not mean diesel. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's a Volkswagen diesel. No, this is this could be a supercar wearing the skin of a Ford Mustang. So let me look up the stats rather than I just try and rattle it all off from memory, because the Ford Mustang GTD, it's got some cool tech. Ford calls it the performance supercar. Obviously, you've got the insane, GT racing, inspired exterior. I think it looks absolutely amazing. More manufacturers need to be building cars like this that look like this from the factory, because then you never feel compelled to really modify them. Because this is what we want anyways. It looks amazing. And it's all functional. It's gorgeous. I love it. It's like the GT3 RS. And we've got to compare it to that, because I think that's the main competitor of this car. Let me explain. Full carbon fiber body. magnesium wheels, amazing suspension technology. It's got a 5.2 liter supercharged V8, I'm assuming derived from either the Predator V8 in the S550 GT500 or even just the Coyote engine in the standard Mustang GT. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to stroke those to 5.2 liters. In fact, Ford sells the Illuminator crate engine, which is a 5.2 liter displacement Coyote crate motor rated for over, I think it's 560 horsepower, NA, something like that. It's basically using parts from the Voodoo motor, but it's got the cross-plane crankshaft, as far as I understand it. But this could be based off of the Predator engine, which is also very, very stout. And now, the first thing people are going to see typically is the way it looks, the price tag, which is $300,000, no slouch in terms of price tags, for a Ford Mustang. A lot of people are going to say, 300 grand for a Ford Mustang? This thing, genetically, shares very little with a standard Mustang. I'm going to say that right now. We've already talked about the engine, but supercharged Mustangs are not a new concept. And if you thought that, Carroll Shelby would have to come out of his grave and slap you around and correct you with a very long presentation of why you're a moron. But it's got all kinds of cool stuff. My favorite detail being the transaxle transmission. It's an 8-speed dual clutch, and transaxle basically means that the transmission is in the back along with the differential, all kind of mixed together, a lot like a Ferrari, for instance, unlike an F12 or something like that. Transaxles are used on a lot of stuff, but having that in a Mustang with an 8-speed dual clutch, the end result is, obviously, amazingly fast shifts. I think the idea of having a dual clutch in a Mustang is really cool. Ever since the GT500 came out with that DCT, I thought, you know what, that's a great idea. We should be seeing more of that. So that transaxle 8-speed dual clutch in the GTD leads to a 50-50 weight distribution in a Mustang. This car, they're going for, I think it's a sub 7 minute Nürburgring time. Yeah, sub 7 minute Nürburgring lap time. That's moving, you guys. They're going after not just anyone, but the kings of the Nürburgring. Porsche, with their crazy GT2 RS records. That's not an easy thing to accomplish, but they're going for it, and they're using the right technology. But now here's an interesting question I want to ask you guys. Ford is marketing this Mustang GTD, a Mustang, as a supercar. The Mustang has graduated from muscle car to sports car to competent sports car to now possibly a supercar. Is a world where we can consider a Mustang a supercar possible? Is that something we can even comprehend? Am I just going to stare into the face of Cthulhu and have my brain melt? I'm thinking maybe. I think maybe the Mustang GTD is a proper supercar. Now here's my argument. No one in their right mind would call a base Porsche 911 Carrera a supercar. It doesn't have the horsepower, it doesn't have the performance, doesn't have the price tag, doesn't have any of that. Well, actually, a base Porsche is pretty expensive, but that's just kind of weird. But the point is, a 911 GT3 RS and a 911 GT2 RS have all been, labeled by enthusiasts as supercars and exotics. Which makes sense. They are very capable machines. However, their lower trim counterparts most definitely are not supercars. Now, the Mustang GT, the GT500, the EcoBoost, those aren't supercars. But if we're following the same logic as Porsche, where the 911 GT3 RS is a supercar, even though the lower trim models aren't, if we're following the same kind of logic, I think the GTD can be a supercar. I don't know, you guys can argue about that in the comments. But kind of moving on to expensive American sports cars, which have also unfortunately been discontinued because the world is ending. If you want the functionality and performance of a modern Hellcat Challenger, but you want the real retro looks of an old Charger without all of the flukiness that you get from having an old rusty steel body Charger, I actually have an option for you, as long as you've got anywhere between $330,000 and $380,000. The company Exomod has designed an exterior conversion package that can be applied to Challenger Hellcats, Red Eyes, and the Hennessy Challenger Hellcats, or whatever they're referring to. they will do a full carbon body exterior package conversion that looks like a perfect one-to-one replica of a 60s, 70 Dodge Charger. But you still get the nice modern interior, the nice modern transmission, that Hellcat Hemi V8 with anywhere between 700 to 1,000 horsepower, depending on what package you get through Exomod. And I think it's actually a really cool idea. And normally stuff like this, you know, replicas and kit cars and things like that, I'm kind of always a little about stuff like that. There's very rare cases where I'm cool with that sort of thing. But this is so well executed and looks so good, and actually makes the Hellcat or above trim models lighter, because they cut off the whole body and just stitch on and attach this carbon exterior. It saves weight. Now, granted, it is $300,000 to basically $400,000 to buy, but it's super cool looking. And I personally would want one in Furious Fuchsia, because they made those limited production Furious Fuchsia Challenger RTs when they first came out with the new Challenger. They never put that color on any of the Hellcats, even though I actually really like that color, which is kind of unusual for me. So I think I would want that color on one of these. Either that or like just exposed carbon fiber with a clear coat over it. Something like that. That would also be pretty cool. Now, harking back to what I was talking about earlier with the Mustang GTD, let's talk about road cars that look like race cars from the factory, but are road legal. And I'm saying this as a BMW fanboy, well, more so of classic BMWs and model ones. I'm not sure about the G chassis M cars. I'm not sure about that yet. But Porsche has come out with the 911 GT3 RS. We've all seen it by this point. It looks freaking amazing. It looks like a GT car. It looks like a GT3 car. It looks spectacular. Killer performance, which is obvious. You got that PDK 7-speed dual clutch. The best in the business. Without a doubt, it's just the way it is. There's no arguing. And I would even say, and this will make some people heated in the comments, I'm sure. I'm sorry, but even though I'm a Lamborghini fan as well, it looks better than the Huracan STO. Mainly because they found a way to stay within roadworthy regulations by giving it that awesome race car wing / spoiler, I can't remember the difference. And without having it hang over the rear bumper, they've still made it look not too small and not disproportionate to the rest of the exterior. Whereas if you look at the STO, and you look at the rear wing on the Super Trofeo street car, the wing looks a little too small. It needs to be bigger. It needs to hang over the back of the car. It needs to be wider and all kinds of stuff. But they can't do that legally. They're not allowed to. If you were to put an actual Super Trofeo race car Gen 1 wing on the STO, I would probably take the STO. But as it stands from the factory, the 911 GT3 RS just looks absolutely amazing. You've got to be, I don't know, on acid or something, or in the middle of getting a lobotomy to not realize how beautiful this car is. And there are not a lot of beautiful cars on the modern market today. And not to mention, if Porsche, on top of building cars like this, also manages to find a way to save the internal combustion engine with their e-fuel ventures, Porsche's going to be king for a long time if they succeed at all of this stuff, on top of still making exemplary vehicles. It's just objective. That's just objectively how it is. If they're going to succeed at all of these endeavors. Granted, the e-fuel one is probably a long-term investment that is not going to pay off anytime soon, but I'm hoping it works out, because otherwise we're all going to have to give up on the hobby if EVs take over. But moving on to the more kind of lower end spectrum, however, dealer markups are kind of making this a little pointless. The new Honda Civic Type R, a car that a lot of people seem to really like. It's got great performance. It's got a manual, which, fantastic. Honda, you got your head screwed on straight still, so that's good. It sounds alright, but, you know, these cars are meant to be modified. Catback will fix that, no problem. Just don't take it to California. They'll fucking lynch you or something. It's not worth it. My main gripe with this car is that it suffers from the same issue as the last generation of the Subaru WRX and WRX STI. From the front, it looks really good. It almost looks a little Evo-esque, but I'm willing to forgive that because the Evo 10 looked really cool. But the problem is, the front of the car, it's a lot less, you know, angular and aggressive than the last generation, because a lot of people criticized it for that, for having all these fins and diffusers and aerodynamic bits on it. Fine, whatever. They dialed it back a bit. The front end still looks amazing. I actually really like it. But then when you look at the back, you just go, It looks like a melted candle to me. It looks too curvy, too bubbly, and some people like that. But for me, it looks like the ass end of a corgi, and I'm just not into that crap. It just looks weird to me. A wing can't even save it for me. I wish they had used the rear end of this Civic instead, and then also used the front end of the modern Type R. And then I think it would have looked awesome. I probably would have bought one. And that's saying something. I don't like buying brand new cars. It's freaking expensive. But I like Hondas and cars like this. I like sporty sedans. I like 4-cylinders. I like turbo 4-cylinders. I like turbo Hondas. But they just missed it for me. And plus, I'm not a huge fan of front-wheel drive cars anyways, but if they'd made it look as amazing as I could picture it being in my head if they had just fixed the rear end, yeah, I would have been into it. However, I don't know if my local Honda dealership would have marked me up or not on it. My Toyota dealership doesn't mark me up on stuff. My Ford dealership doesn't mark me up on stuff. They just sold a nice red S650 at my Ford dealership. No markup. Sold it at sticker price. It was there for like a day. And then it sold. And then I saw it driving around earlier today, which was really cool. And my Toyota dealership, they haven't been marking people up on GR cars or anything like that. They sell things at sticker price. And the sales managers have all basically told me, almost word for word, we don't do that scummy. We like to engage in honest practices. We would like to stop giving people reasons to see car dealerships go away and give them a good customer experience. And they always do, so I always recommend them to people. Here's a neat new car, the Toyota Century, which, as far as I understand it, is a badge that has been used in the past, but the US is now going to get the Century. And it's basically an SUV with a 3.5-liter V6 out of a Lexus TX550. It's a plug-in hybrid, and it's basically a bargain budget version of a Rolls Royce. It's meant to be a luxury car. And my wife Heather doesn't like the way it looks very much. She'd rather have a 4Runner TRD. But I think it looks really cool. Like, I would want one optioned out where it's all black, have some gold trim, Lexus style, put a bull bar on the front, and have that be my kind of murdered out, feeling badass, cruising, comfortable luxury mobile. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. It's like $170,000 though, US. So it's not cheap. It's pretty expensive for a Toyota. It might be their most expensive car. It's more expensive than the Supra. I think it's an interesting decision for them to bring this to the US because they discontinued the Avalon, I think, and that was supposed to be their kind of sporty luxury sedan. And it was a very handsome looking car, but I guess they weren't selling enough. So I'm wondering why they think they're going to be able to sell the Century. They must have already kind of done some research maybe to get some data on whether there's any kind of interest or demand for it. Because I feel like a lot of people that are in the market for cars like Rolls Royces and Bentleys and things like that are more likely to already have money for that stuff anyways. So why would you want to spend $170,000 on a Toyota SUV? Granted, since it's a Toyota, it might hold its value a lot better than a Rolls Royce or a Bentley. So that might be an upside. I don't know. Now here's another car that I've got a lot of strong opinions about. The Lamborghini Revuelto, aka the Scrambled Egg, which is actually named after like a bullfighter or something, kind of like the Aventador. It's the Aventador successor. Naturally aspirated, V12, hybrid. Obviously it's going to be very, very fast. It's dual clutch now. It looks very cool from the front, and it looks stupid in the back. I don't know how it's possible for people to like the way this car looks. I think the placement of the exhaust is my biggest gripe with it. If the exhaust was in the diffuser at the very bottom, akin to an Aventador SV or something like that, I think it would look so much better. Because from the front, I really like the design language they've got with the daytime running lights and all that good stuff, and having all the Y shapes everywhere. I think it looks really nice. It looks like a huge car. It looks like it's a lot bigger than the Aventador. And it's cool that it finally has a dual clutch now. And having the engine rotated in the engine bay is also really cool. I think that's really neat. I think they've done a lot of awesome work on this car. I just think from the back it doesn't look very good. However, if I were to buy one, if I'm fortunate enough to be in the market, I'm more of an Aventador guy myself though, so I'd probably buy that if I actually had the money. You could always take the rear bumper off, 2018 YouTuber style, do a bumper delete, do a mounted wing, and try and emulate the look of the rear end of the Lamborghini SC-V12. I think that could be possible. It would still be on the street. It would look mean. You wouldn't really need to tune it. You could put a cat back on it if it's not already loud enough. A lot of Lamborghinis from the factory have been plenty loud as it is already stock, like the Performante, the STO, the SVJ. They all sound great stock, so you really don't need to modify them, but you can, obviously. Well, unless if you're in California, but I'm hoping you guys aren't that sadistic on yourselves. I don't know. The rest of the car looks extremely awesome, but I'm still more of an Aventador SV guy myself, especially if I can get one in Blue Lyle. But I think there's only one, and it's a Roadster, and I'm not a big Roadster guy. But that also brings us to the Huracan replacement. No idea what it's called. All I know is it's got the same design language in the back with the pig nose end with the exhaust at the top. I don't know. I don't like it. But you got to say goodbye to the 5.2-liter naturally aspirated V10. It's gone. It's extinct. They are replacing it with a twin-turbo V8. I think it's also going to be a hybrid. It's going to be fast. And at least we're still getting twin-turbo V8s on the market somehow because, I don't know, McLaren decided to sacrifice their balls, and now they only sell twin-turbo V6s. And I think Ferrari's doing the same thing, and I just... Ugh. What a miserable time to be alive. I just have zero interest in... If I'm in the market for a Ferrari or a McLaren, I want their twin-turbo V8s, or their naturally aspirated V8s. But, I don't know. It's stupid. But... Lamborghini is still making cool stuff. So right now, they're making the coolest stuff. Naturally aspirated V12s in the Revuelto. It is naturally aspirated. It doesn't have forced induction. For those of you that think a hybrid system is forced induction, get your head checked, get a CAT scan or an fMRI, because that's dysfunctional logic. And twin-turbo V8, it's a lot better than electric vehicles, and it's a lot better than V6s. Because if you want a Lamborghini, you don't want a V6. That's silly. Why would you want that? Unless if you're getting an R35 GTR, which you could also argue is a supercar. Some people have. I'm still kind of on the fence about it myself. My only thing is with the Huracan before it dies, apparently the Technica is the final version of the Huracan, which is sad, because I was really hoping they would make, even if it was like a limited production of 50 units in the world, like how they did with the Gallardo, where they make a Squadra Corsa version, where it inherits all kinds of race car stuff, straight onto the street car chassis, from the factory, ready to go. The ultimate version of the Huracan. And, because then they could have it be the Lamborghini Huracan Squadra Corsa Evo 2, or something like that. And use the Evo 2 front and rear end with the tail lights and headlights that are only available on the Evo 2 race car. Normal customers can't get those. But they went into all that effort to design that stuff, but only put it on the race cars. Maybe they intended to put them on the road cars, but then maybe emissions regulations stopped it from being possible for them to make one more edition of the Huracan. I don't know. I don't know what went wrong, but it's a tragedy, because it would have been really cool to have a Squadra Corsa Huracan just to say goodbye to the V10. Because when you think about it, it hasn't been around that long. Nowhere near as long as the Lamborghini V12. Granted, the Lamborghini V12 has had various iterations over the years, but the number of cylinders has stayed the same. I don't know, man. It's sad. I would have rather have gotten a hybrid naturally aspirated V10, maybe at a lower displacement, bring it down to 4.5 liters or something. I don't know. Honestly, I would rather have the 5-cylinder engine in the Huracan replacement, you know, the engine that's in the Audi RS3, and put that in the Huracan replacement, tune that up to 500, 600 horsepower, and kind of maintain that supercar sound that's still very kind of, you know, associated with the Huracan. And I feel like that would be a much better successor. But I get it. It's probably a lot easier to make a power out of a V8, but it's just not going to be the same. I don't know. I still really like the RS3, though. I think it sounds really cool. So for this segment, this one won't be as long as the last one, but let's talk about the Top Gear Golden Trio, the original gang. Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, James May. So, for those of you that don't know, if you're living under a rock, you can go onto Drive Tribe to find all kinds of recent history, modern content that's being produced that includes the original gang. Whether it's James May cooking, which makes me want to do cooking videos and tell stories like how he does. You've got behind-the-scenes stuff or storytelling stuff with, you know, all three of them. Jeremy talking about cars he regrets selling. James May talking about experiences with their trips and him talking about his gin that he's selling. Richard Hammond, going into detail about his experience of getting injured and how he recovered from it, and some really, really interesting details. Lots of awesome stuff. Some extra footage of Jeremy talking about his farm and how he's been doing. Richard and his endeavors with his automotive shop. James with all of his little extra projects. James has become kind of a natural YouTuber in his own niche way. He's not like an ordinary YouTuber, but he's very kind of cathartic to watch, which I would say is the best way to describe it. He's very kind of entertaining in a relaxing sort of way. So check out Drive Tribe. Obviously, also, the other presenters on Drive Tribe, beyond the original Top Gear trio, are also very charismatic and very entertaining and very informative. So you want to check them out as well. Don't sell them short and just assume they're not as entertaining. They are also very entertaining. They've got that classic dry British humor and very fun to watch, but obviously also the boys are there as well. Like, you've also got James May roasting YouTuber cars, roasting their Hellcat Charger they had. I didn't even know you could bring those into the UK, but I also get the impression it's a lot easier to import cars into the UK than it is to the US, because land of the free, and also lots of red tape and lobbying to make things like gray market cars much more difficult to obtain. There's a good video of Hammond and May playing chess while drinking gin and just having good banter. There's videos of James and his pub that he's running or is a shareholder of, co-owner of. Obviously, there's the Grand Tour. They're still making content. They're not following the original formula anymore, where they do the news show, talk show, and then their adventures and car reviews. Now it is just basically every episode is a special. But it's still all very cool and very entertaining. The most recent one being, as of this recording, the Scandi Flick. So check that out on Amazon Prime. Never thought I would say that, promoting Amazon, but it's where they are, so you gotta watch it. But it does kind of make me want to do a road trip of my own someday. Do some kind of challenge. Like, do a big road trip. Like, I'm a truck driver, so I'm used to doing lots and lots of miles. Like, I could do 3,000 miles in a week without really blinking. So maybe I should do something like that in some kind of cool sports car. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I could get like an E92 M3, build it up to be a bootleg GTS, drive that from San Francisco to New York. I bet you know what that's a reference to. I could wrap that in Lark Pink, which was recently released and developed by Inozatech and Daily Driven Exotics. So that would be really cool to see. It's a great recreation of the original McLaren color. Lots of cool stuff with the Top Gear trio online. So check it out if you haven't seen it already. And let me know what you guys think. And, if you've got any suggestions for what I could do from classic Top Gear, like challenges or this and the other, budget car challenges, road trips, or whatever, let me know. I have some ideas already that are actually original that I might do first. But if you got any ideas, let me know. But now, let's take a break from the news and let's talk about the S550 Ford Mustang GT. You see, I've got a car review lined up for you. We reviewed the S197 Ford Mustang GT last time, in the last episode, with the Gen 1 Coyote. This is a Gen 3 Coyote, because it is the S550-2, basically. 2018 plus. This particular one is a 2021. It's a premium. It's got technology package. It's got active sport exhaust. And most importantly, it's got the 10-speed automatic transmission, the 10R80. And the main thing we need to figure out is, does that gearbox ruin the experience of driving the Mustang GT? Or does it enhance it? Let's find out. Welcome everyone to another review for the Ice Age. Today you join us in a 21 Mustang GT Premium. It's an S550 with the Coyote 5.0 V8, naturally aspirated to 460 horsepower, I believe. Here is the window sticker. This particular example MSRP is at $49,030. It's got all the standard equipment, but the stuff included on this vehicle is premier trim, accents, floor mats, adaptive cruise control, voice activation, touchscreen. I'm not going to be messing with that. I'm not a huge advocate for voice activation anything. You've got the Safe and Smart package. This car is equipped with the 10R80, otherwise known as the 10-speed automatic. You've got climate control in the front seats. You can cool your butt or cook your butt, depending on your kinks. This has got the digital dash, which I believe is the technology package. And if you're going to get something with the 10-speed, you've got to get this cool digital display, because you can go through all the different settings, and when you're shifting, it's cool to have a race-style tachometer. But when you're normally driving, you can also have a good-looking kind of cool, futuristic digital display. You've got aluminum wheels, 20 inchers. We've got a spare wheel and tire, 50 state emissions. I'm not sure what that is. The base price is $40,000, so it's basically got $9 grand worth of options, destination delivery, all kinds of stuff like that. I just wanted to give you guys an idea of how much this particular example costs, because that's something worth talking about. Because if you're willing to spend basically $50,000 on a Ford Mustang, is it worth getting just a GT? Yes, this is a premium, but then you've got stuff like the Mach 1, which is basically the same price as this with an extra few $1,000s, which doesn't really mean anything if you're financing. But then if you can afford that and you have cash to spare, what if you'd rather get the GT 500? Because then you have the dual clutch, which in my opinion is probably better than this 10-speed, and you've got 750 warranted horsepowers. Granted, you can get, we can start before we start driving, you can get a supercharger from Roush that will give you about 750 horsepower on your Mustang GT and still have it be warranted. I'm going to turn off the AC now, because I don't know if that's blowing into the microphone. The AC works really fast on this car. So this car has 485 miles. We're not going to be putting many more miles onto it. We're just going to be having some fun. We'll probably put 15 on today. Because it rained earlier today, I will not be turning off traction control, but you've got all these cool switches here at the bottom here that are quite fun to use. You got the hazards. You've got the traction control where if you press it once, it turns it off slightly, I guess. Or if you hold it for a certain amount of time, it will turn advanced track off, which we kind of demonstrated in the S197 Mustang, the first example of a Mustang GT to ever have the engine in this car. This is a Gen 3 Coyote car. And it's kind of interesting that we're reviewing this car today because, well, Dodge has basically just said in 2023, all of our cars are going to suck for anyone that has self-respect. As an automotive enthusiast, as a human being trying to save the world, probably not so much, but we don't really care about that because we're just trying to make ourselves happy and not want to end it all. So that's what V8s are all about. Also, Ford's mentality, you know, everyone was always saying Dodge is putting Hellcat this into Hellcat that, Hellcat in a minivan. Ford is putting together a crate engine kit where you've got the 7.3 Godzilla V8 and a transmission to go with it and a standalone ECU, and their demo car is an S550. They're the ones snorting cocaine off of prostitutes and building crazy cars now. Mopar is no longer the brotherhood of muscle, at least not with their future cars, because no one wants a car that sounds like a cat in heat. Unless if you're into that, in which case, get a CAT scan. So, we're in a 21 GT Premium, 460 horsepower. The Mach 1 has 480. Not a massive difference. Let's get out of here. I gotta stop ranting. Let's talk more about this car. So, kind of like in a Subaru WRX for just a second, we've got this typical view over a very long hood because it's a muscle car. But it's also kind of like a WRX because the WRX has that weird bubble hood. So I'm in manual mode. I can put it back into auto by just clicking it forward and then pulling it back. You want to keep it, and I like driving it in Sport Plus, but then having the steering in Comfort most of the time, because it's softer and not as jittery. And then for when you're wanting to go fast, normal or sport, normal's a little better. Because it doesn't have a ton of power, it's kind of happy with you shifting yourself or doing it in automatic mode. I've heard a few people say that, you know, when you've got tons and tons of power, the transmission is going to be a lot happier with you shifting than with it being an automatic mode, which I think is kind of interesting, because usually it's the opposite of that. You know, with all these big twin turbo Huracans and things like that, the people that build the cars are like, we'd rather the car shift itself. So it downshifts fairly quickly. The main reason why I think the dual clutch, even like maybe a ZF8 speed, might have a couple advantages over the 10R80. The 10R80 is great for straight line stuff, without a doubt. Autocross, cross country, carving canyons, not so much, because when you're in manual mode shifting, for one thing, the gears don't last very long because it's 10 speed, which is good for staying in the power, because you're always shifting and getting back into the power, and you never really leave the meat of the power curve, which is very cool. So it's very usable. But the downshifts, when you're, you know, coming up to a corner, or you want to shift maybe halfway through a corner for whatever reason, the downshift is going to upset the balance of the car if you're not going at the right speed and not shifting at the right time, because the car doesn't know how to rev match properly. If you've ever ridden in a car with someone, or if you can remember back to the days of you learning how to drive manual and you were learning how to downshift, it feels like someone who doesn't know how to rev match properly, where they kind of blip the throttle but not properly, so you feel stuff rubbing together and the engine being forced to the proper RPMs for the gear that you're trying to go into. So it kind of lurches sometimes, and that's not ideal if you're doing anything with corners or just a lot of situations. Automatic mode, it's fine. It knows not to, oh, my GoPro fell over. The glass in this car doesn't like to have GoPro stuck to it. Luckily, this mount I've got the proper camera on, it doesn't seem to be a problem. I've got 3 suction cups for this one camera, because I've decided I wanted to experiment. It's a very nice place to be inside this car. I think the interior is actually very pleasing. It's actually quite symmetrical. So you've got these kind of, I'm not sure what to call them, kind of outcroppings on the dash that kind of shield. You got this one here on the left that shields the gauges, so I guess you don't have any glare. But then, just to be symmetrical, they've got that on the right side, and it just says Mustang on that side. And I appreciate that, because it's very pleasing for me to look at, because you've got this kind of mound over here. You got the 3 retro style vents and kind of the fake carbon fiber trim of plastic, and then you got the mound on the right, and it's pretty. This is a very nice car to be in. I don't really know how to review the quality of the car, because this is probably one of the more expensive cars I've driven, and I don't really pay attention to build quality most of the time, so I can't really give you an honest review on that. All I can say is, because it's a new car, it's a very nice place to be. I will say, the nice thing about Ford and this car having the active exhaust on it as an option is that it sounds damn good stock, so hopefully California won't have a problem with it, because they won't be able to say you have a modified exhaust. But then if you're registered out of state, they can't give you a ticket for that anyways. But this is a stock exhaust. It's a very good soundtrack. If I put it in the neutral here, it sounds really good. And the windows go up really fast. You see that? And it's actually kind of quiet in here. It's a heavy car, so it's not going to feel super nimble. But because this is the S550 with the independent rear suspension, so now you know, Ford Mustangs are competent sports cars, especially with the independent rear suspension. Not saying the S197 isn't. The S197 was kind of the beginning of Ford's Renaissance era. This car is a serious car. You know, they've started going for lap records more than just quarter-mile times, because the independent rear suspension kind of takes away some of that straight line speed, maybe a little bit, but it adds to the stability, especially for people that don't know how to drive. And the meme kind of is, people that drive Mustangs don't always know how to drive because it's such accessible horsepower. Like, sure, this car is $50,000 brand new. What's it going to be in 5 years? 19 grand, 25 grand? It's not going to be a lot of money. So it's pretty remarkable. And honestly, it's not that hard to drive, you know, unless if you're being cocky and you're thinking you're Ayrton Senna and you're turning advanced track off when you really don't know what you're doing. You know, that's how you become a meme. Hold on, we've got a bridge. So I don't know if you heard that. So here's my main opinion. This is the last time we'll talk about it, on the 10R80, the 10-speed. Most of the time, if you're at speed, downshifts are fine. It doesn't upset the balance of the car. But that's if you're at speed and you're going at the right speed for it to happen. If you're not, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. The upshifts are even a little violent too. It feels like a single clutch, old school kind of car sometimes, where it kicks you a little bit. But this is auto mode, and you can hear it shifting. And so the other thing with auto mode, that it can sometimes be more fun to be doing the shifting yourself, is that if you're on the highway and you're trying to maintain a speed of like 55 or whatever the speed limit is here, 55 or 60, and you touch the throttle a little bit when you're in sport mode, I guess, it's a little sensitive. And so it will kind of go, oh, is it time to go really fast? And it will go down 2 whole gears and start going, and then it will realize you don't want to go fast. And then it will kind of go, so that's a little odd. I'm going to turn these lights on so you can see me. Hopefully as it gets dark out. I chose a great time to do this. At least with the stock tune, you know, you're never not in the power. It's always available, especially in auto mode. It's going to downshift to the gear you need to be in fairly quickly, not instantaneously. There's going to be a split second where it kind of thinks, hold on, you're sure? Okay, here, let's go. So if that's not a problem for you, this is actually a good deal. $50,000 though, you're probably worth getting a Mach 1, because you got the slightly more aggressive exterior, and you've got the better tune, the better software in the 10R80, and you've got some extra Ford performance parts put in there, and a slightly stronger Coyote out of the box. But yeah, these cars are no joke. They're competent in a straight line. You know, you can make 700 wheel horsepower with like 8 pounds of boost or whatever. Whether it's Roush or VMP, whatever it is you go with, they're super, super comfortable. I'm an average American, if you catch my drift. So these cars are the right size for me. They're pretty big. These seats are very comfortable. The seat cooling system is honestly quite nice, because there are days. How do I turn this off? There are days where you need to cool off, and then you turn on the seat heater and you go, that is definitely not what you need. The steering wheel is very pleasing. It's basically the same steering wheel Ford's been using for the last 10 years, and that's fine. You know, if Porsche can use the same design of car for 50 years, maybe 1,000 years, I think Ford is allowed to use the same design of steering wheel if it works. So I like it. 3 spokes, pleasing to look at, easy to hold. The seating position's good. Not a lot of complaints from the driving experience in here. I'm going to get onto the freeway here. We'll merge on, and we'll merge the way you're supposed to. Not necessarily like you're in a NASCAR race, but, you know, don't waste time getting up to highway speed, and don't be a little bitch if you need to speed up some more to merge properly. See, we're at 60. Now, the cool thing about this exhaust, because it's active, if you live in a place with a terrible homeowners association, the cold starts on these cars are pretty loud. This car is surprisingly good sounding for a 2021 car with a V8. You know, it's not muffled. Yes, it does have a soft limiter in neutral. That's a thing. I think soft limiters are stupid. It's probably to protect the engine or something. But it sounds pretty good. You can hear most of the engine. The only way to rev it all the way up to the top is to go out onto the road and drive fast. So if Ford doesn't want people to do that, maybe take that soft limiter off. But you can go into the settings and put it into quiet. And I'm pretty sure you can even make... See, now you can't hear it. And now you can. It's a noticeable difference. For a stock exhaust, these days, when most of the world is trying to ruin sports cars for us, the fact that Ford was able to make this is pretty cool. Like, this isn't a modified exhaust. Like, if you're driving in New York and their bullshit cameras takes a picture of you, you could just say, I might be loud, but it's not a modified exhaust, so it shouldn't really be breaching any sound limits, as far as I can tell. So it's got me in 8th when I'm not really trying to go fast, so that's a little weird. The outside of the car, I'm just gonna say it, the S197 and the S550 are my two most favorite body styles of Mustang. And I think I probably prefer the S550 just a little bit more. But hilariously, even though I'm driving a 2021 GT, I kind of like the pre-facelift S550 style of 2015 through 2017, or the looks of the GT350s, or the looks of the GT500s. I think that front looks a little better to me. The front end of anything that's 2018 plus just looks a little bit odd to me, like the car had a weird, like, bad nose job where it's starting to fall off a little bit. It kind of slopes and goes down a little bit, and it just doesn't quite work for me. I'm sure it's advantageous for some reason. I just don't think it's as aesthetically pleasing. So I actually like the look of the GT350s and the 15 through 17s. Beyond that, it's a very pretty car. It's got that fastback, you know, side profile. When you're looking in the mirrors, you can see that the car has got some nice hips, because you can see them very clearly looking out the rearview mirror, which I think is quite hilarious. Visibility in here is actually fantastic. It's better than driving an SUV, to be perfectly honest. You don't feel like you're gonna have a problem navigating anywhere. The cruise control works well. It's got a lot of safety features like lane assist. The steering wheel can vibrate if you feel like you're feeling tired and you just want to know if you start drifting off. Totally cool, I get it. My only complaint with some of the controls inside the car is that if you want to mess with the nitty-gritty details of the AC, some of the things that you want to do, like if you want to say switch it from blowing on your feet to blowing at your face, you have to use the touchscreen, which is a little annoying. I personally don't like getting rid of buttons and having to use touchscreens for certain features, but it is what it is. It's not terrible. For a sports car, it feels more like a Grand Tour, which makes sense. It's a GT, so doing a road trip in this, I could do 3,000 miles in this thing in a week, and I'd feel pretty good. Which basically means I'm just saying I could do a Gumball 3000 in this car and not give a shit, because it's just so comfortable. I'm not going to be able to keep up with all the other dudes in Gumball, theoretically, but it'll be very comfortable. It would be more comfortable than my semi, and I do 3,000 miles a week in that. If I could do my commercial job in a Mustang somehow, I'd be a lot happier, but that would probably be extraordinarily expensive. We've got the Apple CarPlay. The stereo system shouldn't really be all that surprising. It's very nice. You can customize the mood lighting in here to be any color you want. My wife decided it needed to be kind of a grabber blue, so it's quite nice. You've got, when you open the doors, it illuminates the ground and it says Mustang on it. It's a very pleasing car. I like that America came back and decided, you know what, we are going to make competent sports cars. You know, with like, especially with cars like when the ZR1 came out, and then the C7 Corvette came out, and that was out-cornering Porsches. We've got the Mustang with the independent rear suspension, which can keep up where the, you know, again, the GT500, I should say, with 750 horsepower, but still kind of the same chassis and setup, more or less. Just showing the new kind of school of thought that Ford is using when building these is they're focusing on handling now too. And so a GT500 can keep up with a multi-million-dollar Ford GT, the modern one, the car that won a Le Mans race, on a track with a huge price difference. It's just amazing. These cars are competent. They're a car you should consider if you want a good car for the money. And you don't need the $9,000 worth of options this car has. You don't need to get a new one either. So that's another thing. And it's not, you can use it as a daily, obviously. You can drive it for 3,000 miles. It can be a daily. The trunk space is very good. If you guys remember, when I reviewed the S197, the owner of that car said, you can fit a body back there quite easily. And hilariously, when this car was purchased, the dealer even said, it's a good trunk. You can fit a body back there. And so my wife confirmed that by not being murdered, but climbing into the trunk. We just ticked over to 502 miles. So yeah, my kind of final thoughts are, if this car was $40,000 or $35,000, something like that, these cars kind of have to be a little more expensive now with all the technology that's in them, but you can get them used, so that's no big deal. It's a good car to choose. When you start getting to 50 grand, I'd say maybe look at some Mach 1s. But if you really want a Mustang and you want, you know, an upper echelon experience while still having that good old American muscle V8 experience, get the supercharged GT500, because that's going to feel like someone went in, built the motor, and then decided, you know what, if it breaks, you don't have to pay for all of it. So it's kind of neat. Ford it's not quite the same lineup as Dodge, where you've got the Hellcat, the 392, the SRT, or whatever all the different versions are. You've got the GT, the GT Premium, the Mach 1. You can look at the GT 350s. You can look at the GT 500. You can go through Shelby and you can get the GT Super Snake with 850 horsepower. There's a ton of options. And you don't necessarily have to modify them, but that is also part of the culture. So they're also one of the best platforms. And because it's, you know, if you're in America, parts are everywhere and it doesn't take long to get them because they're in America. You don't have to overnight parts from Japan or Germany or Italy or wherever your car is from. It's a great experience without a whole lot of headaches. So now it's starting to get dark and the automatic lights have turned on. But yeah, I know I do a lot of stuff with kind of more exotics than a lot of tuner cars. So American Muscle is a rare sight on this channel. Not so much in this series, the Ice Age. It's a difficult car to justify. The whole thing feels quite silly. Like, it's a very immature yet serious sort of thing where it's like, look at me. You don't need a car that can do this. And so it can be silly at a drop of a hat. But then, you know, if you're at some lights or whatever, or a drag strip, it's ready to be serious. This car does have a line lock feature, which basically locks the front brakes so you can do a burnout without messing up your rear brakes all that much, or ruining your clutch, ideally. I'd say the overall stance of this car is quite nice. You know, the previous body style of the Mustang, the stock stance was kind of 4x4 mode, not super flattering to look at. Just turning in here. Steering's pretty darn responsive. And I'm just in normal mode. Like, if I went up to sport, it's pretty sensitive, pretty jerky. I don't really score these cars or really give you any. I just kind of tell you my experience and my kind of thoughts on them, and if it all kind of fits your preferences and what you think you're willing to deal with and what you think you can afford. Hopefully you can make a choice from there. I'm just going to keep it in auto, let you guys have a listen. Go down a gear. See, it kind of pushes me around. It's not terrible if you're going in a straight line, but if you're trying to, you know, it crackles and pops too. If you're trying to do curves and all that, it's a little disconcerting, because, you know, you don't want to become a meme. At speed, I'm not going to say what speed that was, that downshift was just fine. See? Pretty stable. I did that with basically one hand while I was fiddling with my left window. Probably can't do that when you've got 750 horsepower, but I don't know how stable the new GT500 is. But yeah, that is at this point the best choice for an American muscle car that's competent and still kind of fun, unless if you want a car that sounds like a cat in heat. So there is also that. Because this is going to be cheaper than the Corvette. Its main competitor is the Camaro, but that's apparently on the chopping block. Whereas we've got one more generation of Mustang left. The way things are going, we probably won't have any more. So I'll be very interested to see how the S650 does. Hopefully Porsche can save us with its hydrogen carbon blend methanol, and we can continue to have fun. What I'm thinking is, this show is going to continue even once I'm the last gas-powered car on the road. The last episode will just be me going to federal prison for driving a noisy car. So, anyways, just wanted to let you guys know what I thought of this car. It's a great choice. This one's optioned a little too high to the point where I think you could just get in Mach 1. And in this climate, with everything going on, it's amazing it even exists. So, for those of you that can afford anything from $24,000 to $50,000, and you want a V8, and you don't want it to be stupid, just silly and fun, that's what this is all about. I'm going to try, the next time I drive a Mustang, it's either going to be the next generation of Mustang or a GT500, whatever I can get my hands on next. Because then I'll be able to give you guys a better idea of whether, you know, the dual clutch is really worth it or not. So, I can imagine a lot of people watching this show prefer older cars, naturally aspirated, big displacement, powerful V8s, V10s, and V12s. Obviously, loud, shouty race cars and things like that. So let's go over some cool cars that have been covered by some awesome YouTube channels that can't be built anymore today because they wouldn't pass the stringent emissions regulations pretty much anywhere. But that's why the used market is so cool. So let's start off with the 840 horsepower, 7.7 liter, V12 powered TVR Subaru Speed 12. This is a car I didn't even realize you could get footage of. They're super rare. They're non-existent online. Most of the footage you find are of replicas and things like that, but Drive Tribe managed to find one. I don't know how. And the owner of this car, at the time of Drive Tribe's recording, was planning on selling their original Speed 12 because they had actually made a near one-to-one replica with which they feel less ashamed of driving, because obviously if you've got a real Speed 12, you're going to be kind of hesitant to drive it because it's one of a kind. You don't really want to ruin it, understandably. But if you've got a replica that basically gives you the same experience, you know, you feel more comfortable with driving it, which I totally get. And you can get some good money by selling it because it is one of a kind. It's amazing. You know, TVRs, it's a shame because I wish they were still making TVRs today, but I think they got sold to Russian ownership, which these days they're kind of doomed to be stuck in limbo for reasons I'm not going to talk about. But yeah, but TVRs are really cool. And the Speed 12, I've got to say, is the automotive manifestation of the word murderous. Just the angles, the fins, the aerodynamics, the exhaust, that engine. I love classic British race cars and supercars. They're super special and super cool. They might not be massively reliable, because that's what I'm always told when I'm talking about Aston Martins and things like that, which we'll talk about in a second. But man, there is nothing else like TVRs. Just nothing. And just check out the video. I had never even seen or heard one running before. On video, in person, whatever. It doesn't matter. But kind of more attainable. The next car I'm going to talk about, the Aston Martin V12 Vantage. Now, I personally prefer the last generation of the V12 Vantage, like the V12 Vantage S, more so than the modern one. I think it looks better. I think it's more charismatic. I think the engine has more character for obvious reasons. It's naturally aspirated. And I think it's just inherently beautiful. I know that's a subjective thing, but I just think it's beautiful. I think it's better looking. I think it is actually more akin to a work of art. Most modern cars, you can't really say that. Most modern cars are very engineered to be performance-oriented. They're a lot less focused on aesthetics. They're a lot less focused on character. They don't have as much personality. And, you know, just it's a completely different experience. It's more kind of functionality-focused, which there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But it is a shame that we have made that transition, which is bringing us further and further into the world of EVs, where suddenly everything is about function and nothing is about fun. But, you know, we knew they were going away anyways. As far back as when, you know, the V12 Vantage first was released and Jeremy Clarkson was driving it, and he made this beautiful piece of automotive television, automotive journalism.
Cars like this will soon be consigned to the history books.
It is, you know, he was basically saying goodbye to the car maybe 10 years early. But yeah, he was right. Cars like that are going extinct. The writing was on the wall. It's a real shame. Obviously, there's the used market. But the whole thing with that is that because they won't be building more cars like that, eventually there's just not going to be support for those cars. Manufacturers are going to stop building OEM parts for replacement and repairs and maintenance. And the aftermarket, depending on the car you're talking about, might just be non-existent even when they're brand new. So I guess that's one argument for being a collector and not driving your cars, is at least you can keep them in pristine condition and then you know, have it be like a museum piece, to be like, look at this. Back in the day, they built stuff like this. And now they can't. And it's a shame. But here it is in the flesh for you to appreciate, even if it can't run, because I've just been letting it sit here to more or less rot. It's just polished on the outside. So there's an argument for that. But also check out these body kits for, you know, my favorite generation of the Vantage. I think they look really cool. You know, a GT3 style Aston Martin V12 Vantage would be really cool on the street. I don't know if many people would find that appealing. I think a lot of people would rather keep it stock because it's very, very pretty. And, you know, if you start messing with the lines and the fenders and things, it could really screw it up. Don't worry, I'm on my day off. I just got home. We don't need to worry about alcohol in my system. I won't be getting back into the truck for another 2 days. But up next, I wanted to show you guys some cool kind of project cars and kit cars I found, as well as neat aftermarket modifications that are offered on the aftermarket currently, right now, as of me recording. And I wanted to start with in my opinion, the most interesting kit cars, specifically SLC kit cars, which from where I'm sitting sound like an amazing deal. I mean, think about it. If you want to become, you know, a track driver, but you don't want to use a road car, and you want something as capable as a race car, but you don't have the budget, the SLC kit car seems to be, you know, a great option. They're super light. You can, if you don't feel like building it yourself, you can take it to a builder. You can use pretty much any engine you want. People have used Ford V8s, Lamborghini 5-liter V10s, LSs, all of the obvious engines. I think someone somewhere even put a rotary in one once, which I think is super cool, actually. It's mid-engined. The transmission options are basically infinite. And you get supercar style with GT1 style performance for a bargain price. And obviously the customizability is insane. I don't know, I just think it's worth thinking about. Like, I've talked about this engine in the past, about being one of my favorite engines, is that, you know, imagine having a mid-engine, super light, supercar race car with an Audi 5-cylinder turbo engine out of an Audi RS3. Just put, like, a slightly bigger turbo on it, have it push out 500 wheel horsepower, and you've got a fantastic track toy that sounds amazing. And I don't think you'd really have to worry about it fitting either, because it's not that big compared to like the 5-liter V10, because it's a 2.5-liter 5-cylinder. And people have squeezed the 5.2-liter V10 from the Gallardo and Huracan into these cars, so I'm sure it's doable. People have squeezed the S85 V10 out of the M5 into these cars too. But that's not the BMW engine I would use. I would use, if I'm going to use a BMW engine, I don't think it would be very reliable, but I would use the S70B56 out of the BMW 850 CSI. I'm pretty sure that's the trim level. And build it up, stroke it, build it, and basically make it a budget version of the S70/2/3 in the McLaren F1. Because I can't afford a McLaren F1 or their engines, which are like $250,000 each, I'm pretty sure. At least. I don't know what they are now. It could be more. But it's probably a great track car. I think it's something to look into for you guys. If you think it'd be cool for me to do something like that for content and do like some lap times and track stuff, let me know. Because while my E46 M3 is cool, I don't know if it's as bulletproof enough for the track as it would be for like a kit car or something like this. Obviously, the build quality won't be the same. There'll be some rattling and things like that, but I think it'll be better suited. But speaking of budget GT1 cars, check out probably the coolest replica car I've ever seen on YouTube. This guy in South Africa built an amazing McLaren F1 LM replica. Probably the best replica build I've ever seen. And I think I just said that. ADHD moment. But I'm not kidding. It's like a fantastic 1-to-1 replica. I don't know what engine he has in it. Obviously not the original S70. But the next best thing I would say, if the guy who built that car is watching, contact Fletcher Made Horsepower and see how much it would cost to build a race engine out of an S70. And see if they can't build an engine for you so that it sounds good. Get an exhaust made. Because, oh my God, I would be surprised if there's emissions regulations in South Africa. No, actually there isn't. I know for a fact there isn't. Because when I lived there, my father had a Lexus IS250 that he supercharged, took the cats off, and it was neat. It was neat. It was a pretty car. It was that nice metallic gold. That was a nice car. But yeah, that would be my recommendation to him because, oh man, a car of, that is a project car that is the result of that much labor and love. I would love to see it have the ultimate BMW V12 engine that you can get as a normal person. I 100% believe his car deserves that because it just looks so good. On a more kind of niche note, because I've looked into this myself for my own personal reason, did you know that you can swap the gauge clusters of Lamborghini Huracans? Like, so if you're in the market for a Huracan, but you would like to have the cool Corsa, I believe, gauge cluster of the Performante or the Evo or the STO, but you'd like to only get like a 580-2 or a 610-4, you're in luck. I didn't know this, but apparently you can put in those gauge clusters into standard Huracans, saving you probably a couple $100,000. I mean, if you, as far as I understand it, if you put the Performante gauge cluster into like a 610-4, everything will work fine. You'll get the cool tack and everything like that. The only thing that won't work is you'll get an error for the ALA system not working, because obviously the aerodynamics are not going to work. And my best guess is if you get the gauge cluster out of an Evo all-wheel drive model, you might get an error for the rear wheel steering not working, is my best guess. I don't know 100% sure for a fact if that's the case, but that is my assumption, because I am assuming that is something you can get a code for in the normal Evo, so I would be surprised if you couldn't get a code if you then put the cluster. I'm sure that you would get an error. Who cares? It would look super cool. And I'm pretty sure the same goes for the Aventador. So if you want to get an LP700-4, but you want the SVJ cluster or the S or the SV, I'm pretty sure that's possible too. Granted, I did this research already. Converting an LP700-4 to be an SV would be so expensive, you might as well buy an SV. But if you just want the cluster of like a Huracan Evo or something like that, and you're 610, and then you just put an aftermarket body kit on it, that is probably actually more economical. Now, here's something interesting. Body kits for the Huracan. There's lots of options. Vorsteiner makes awesome stuff. Duke Dynamics. All kinds of companies make cool kits. I've decided which kit I really want, but if I wanted a wide body kit, it's actually pretty hard. The problem is that you would want it to be functional and to be aerodynamically, viable and practical. Functional, like I just said. Redundant words. I love the look of the Liberty Walk Silhouette GT kit for the Huracan, because it reminds me of the Veneno. It's like a baby V10 Veneno, and that's obviously very cool. But I don't know how functional it is in terms of aerodynamics. I don't know if it would actually help the car that much. Whereas P1 Composites has what's called their HTO kit, which is, I'm assuming, a reference to the STO, but it's actually based off of the Huracan Super Trofeo Evo body kit. Not the Evo 2, but the Evo body kit. And it looks like a good one-to-one replica. It's carbon fiber, made for street cars, and it looks very, very good. I haven't seen anyone actually buy it yet. I've only seen footage of it on their YouTube channel, so I don't know of anyone that's actually purchased it yet. But this particular kit looks good so far, so I am hoping it is legit. Because it's very expensive, so I hope no one's going to get scammed. Because that's kind of a problem these days. Because obviously people want their car to look like a GT3 race car. And you could very easily take advantage of those people. Now, Huracan owners and people who want a Huracan. Have you ever wished the Huracan sounded more like the first-gen Gallardo with the even firing V10? I'm pretty sure, the 5-liter V10. Yes, the uneven firing or odd firing, I think it's actually more correct to say the odd firing V10 of the Huracan. It sounds good, don't get me wrong. Sounds very, very good. But the first-gen Gallardo just sounds so much better. It sounds more like an F1 car. It's up there, in my opinion, with the LFA and the Carrera GT. And honestly, I'd rather have a first-gen Gallardo Superleggera over a LFA and Carrera GT. Mostly because, for one, the LFA is expensive, and the Carrera GT sounds like it's really difficult to drive. So I would honestly go for that. And also, it's more my style anyways. Though I do wish it had you could get the modern headlights of the Gallardo on the first gen just to fix that a bit. But to answer the question, do you wish your Huracan sounded like a first gen Gallardo? Do you wish there was a way? Well, ladies and genitals, there is a way. All you got to do is give Steve Morris a call, because he, not too long ago, unveiled and demonstrated a twin-turbo Huracan engine that he built one-off for Houston Crosta for his Huracan STO, and it sounds like a first-gen Gallardo engine. But it's a Huracan engine, and its twin-turbo makes an slowed amount of power, and it sounds like an OG underground racing engine, which is a huge compliment. Do you guys even remember what those cars sounded like? You used to hear them all the time, and now it's like we've all forgotten how good those cars sounded.
But this is a 5.2 even fire 5.0 combination. $1982 at 8,900 RPM.
But yeah, give him a call. See if he can make like a naturally aspirated version. That's what I would want. I would buy like a Performante or something, or an STO, and put an NA version of the engine he built for Houston and put it into the car, and just probably the perfect Lamborghini, apart from the Aventador SV. Now, are you thinking of using E85 in your car? Have you done your research? Do you know the risks? Do you know what to look out for quality fuel? Do you know what could happen if you don't operate your vehicle properly? Do you know what would happen if you put bad fuel in your car? Well, this video will give you an inside look into, the basics of what could go wrong if you don't do your due diligence and do things properly when using E85, because the consequences could be dire. Now, if you can afford to blow up an engine, you might not care as much, but why would you blow up an engine on purpose? Unless if you're Weston Champlin, in which case you're probably just, a really cool guy and a legend and just is really entertaining. But if you're not Weston Champlin, which most people aren't, you might want to watch this video. Now, did you know, because I didn't, that if you put a blow-off valve on a supercharger rather than a turbocharged engine, not only will your blow-off valve, if you vent it to the open air, not only will it go the whoosh and whistle when you let off the gas or rev it, it will also do kind of a sustained constant whistle, what's in this? As you decelerate, which, it really makes me want to get like a Greddy Type S, put it on like an EM1 Civic Si that's been supercharged. It would sound just like Brian's Eclipse, like 1-to-1. It would be so cool. So, now I want to ask you guys something. Because we normally don't talk about EVs on this show, unless if we're talking about how dog shit they are. But, I recently went to the Celebrity Car Museum in Branson, Missouri, and I saw a Back to the Future DeLorean previously owned by Universal, and it got me thinking, are there cars out there that would actually benefit from an EV conversion and would actually make sense, aesthetically? Because I feel like the DeLorean is a rare instance where, obviously, everyone says the gearbox is junk, the engine is junk, it's slow, it's not very good, but we love it because of Back to the Future. So what's a better way to hit 88 miles an hour in style? What about an EV conversion? I know. This is the ice age, the internal combustion engine age, but hear me out. Because the DeLorean in the Back to the Future is meant to be kind of a retro, futuristic style car, having it be electric and pretending it's powered by nuclear fusion by disintegrating banana peels, maybe that would be kind of cool. And if you can put in, like, a nice electric motor that makes cool noises, maybe it'd be all right. Maybe it would actually be pretty decent with all of the Back to... You need to have all the Back to the Future goodies on top of it, though. But, you know, that brings up the question, can an EV sports car sound good? And I'm not talking about synthetic noises. I'm not talking about that Dodge Daytona, you know, cat and heat bullshit. Ugh. That sounds... Ugh. I hate it. Even the Audi e-tron sounds and all those other synthetic noises, they sound nice, but the problem is the fact that I know it's synthetic and being piped through acoustics, it's immersion breaking. Because you have to find a way to immerse yourself and lie to yourself that it's exciting and fun. But because I prefer internal combustion engine sounds where their sounds and noises are generated by explosions in the engine, an electric vehicle is not going to be the same. You know, if you were to have me choose between a fire-breathing dragon and, I don't know, a toaster possessed by Darth Sidious, I would want to take the dragon. I'm sorry, but it's just, I feel like a toaster possessed by Darth Sidious is very meme-worthy, though. So I know a lot of people that would be like, well, let's hear him out. Let's see how this turns out first. But you know what I mean. It was just a really bad comparison. More to the point, the Porsche 7... Let me read this. The Porsche 718 Cayman GT4 E-Performance. Have a listen. That sound, for one thing, I love the blue taillight, but that sound is loud, it's audible from the outside, which is great for spectators and the driver, so you can be proud of it. It's not synthetic, as far as I'm aware. It looks cool. It doesn't follow the stupid design language of most electric vehicles, because I haven't found a single electric vehicle that I like the look of yet. Not the Audi e-tron, not the Neo EP9, none of the, whatever the car is, the Rimac. I don't like the way those look either. The Porsche EV, whatever it's called, I can't even remember. I don't think any of them look good, not even that cool Mercedes EQS or whatever it's called, because the problem is that the side profile of all of them are just weird. And I feel like they're trying to invent a new design language for electric vehicles so that they can kind of associate that look with the future. And the problem is that it looks fucking awful. But if you're going to build an electric vehicle and you want it to look cool, make it sound cool, and make it look like a normal car. At the very least. Oh my god. But yeah, this car is really cool. It doesn't sound like dental tools. It doesn't sound like those high-powered drills they use to split your teeth open. It doesn't look stupid. Porsche. If you're going to build EVs, at least build them to look like that. And then you'll corner the market on everything. If you save the internal combustion engine, and you build cars that look like the 911 GT3 RS, and your EVs still manage to appeal to enthusiasts like how this Cayman GT4 E-Performance does, at least to me in my opinion, like I would drive and own and race this if my car sounded like this. They would corner every market on the planet because no one else has figured it out. No one else is trying hard enough. Speaking of getting close though, and not quite making it, Hyundai. They used to be the laughingstock of the sports car kind of automotive space. Never really taken very seriously. But with their kind of N-series cars lately, that's really started to change. To the point that someone had an Elantra or something like that in California. They had it in N mode, which is the most aggressive setting. It's like putting your car in Corsa or track mode or whatever, or sport mode, where it kind of makes it crackles and burbles. A California cop, you know where this is going, pulled this guy over and said it was making unnecessary noises and that it was backfiring or overrunning or something like that, and he gave him a fix-it ticket. Now the car was fully stock, so how do you fix a factory option? You couldn't drive the car anymore. He had to fix it. He had to pay fines and all kinds of crap. California basically forced Hyundai to buy this car back from this guy. Oh man, why do people live in California again? The weather? It's hot. Hot weather sucks. The economy? There are no reasons for you to be there, objectively speaking, as an automotive enthusiast. Unless if your car is registered from out of state, which I don't think California appreciates too much. Because then they're not getting their cut. But more to the point with Hyundai, trying to get themselves taken seriously. If their cars are already cool enough to get pulled over by the police in stock format, you know they're doing something right. Now they could be doing something very right with their Hyundai Envision 74 concept, because, oh my god, that car looks amazing. It looks like an old school tuner car with a little bit of aftermarket parts already on it, but it looks modern, tastefully so. The only concern I have is the power plant, because they want it to be propelled by electric motors that are kind of given energy from, I hope I'm wording this right, using power from hydrogen fuel cells. So it wouldn't be a hydrogen internal combustion engine. It would be basically an electric vehicle, more or less. And as far as I understand it, sure, that's cool. But just from an enthusiast standpoint, I'm not sure I'm cool with that. Unless if the electric motors make cool noises. The other thing I heard is that they're thinking about doing, or are going to try and do, synthetic shifting, which will actually make the car slower, but it will synthesize the experience of changing gears, which, I hate using this word, but it seems kind of ricey. I'm just not sure. It's pretending to be something it's not, which is not something I'm super a fan of, at least for cars from the factory, especially with electric vehicles. That's all I'm really going to say about that. It just seems like a no in my book. But put a nice ICE engine in it, and yeah, you've got something cool going on. A V8, a V6, twin turbo, whatever. I don't know what engines Hyundai have in their arsenal, but I'm sure they could put together something cool. But that brings me to a video that Dude in Blue made that cleared up something I've always heard about, but never really bothered to look into to learn more about. Have you ever heard about the phantom, legendary, mysterious, impossible, physics-breaking, water-powered car? Well, that Dude in Blue, our boy David Patterson, made a fantastic video going into the history and going over the whole timeline of events and talking about why it was such a big deal and why the events surrounding it make it into such a moth trap for conspiracy theories. So if you love conspiracy theories, you'll like this, because we're basically talking about a car that supposedly breaks physics, could not be explained by scientists that observed the car functioning, and also possibly the guy who invented it got assassinated. So check out his video. It's very interesting. And now for a palate cleanser, because we talked about some not super very Ice Age stuff, did you know that people build and race semis? You probably already did. I didn't. I had no idea, and it's freaking insane. Alright, people will build and race semis in drag races. But that's not all. Not only are they doing that, but they're giving them immensely heavy loads. Like, ridiculously. Like the sort of loads that would be extremely illegal on public roads, obviously. Putting huge strain on these trucks and then having them race to see who gets to the finish line whilst hauling a whole bunch of stuff. It's super fascinating and interesting. And they're chugging smoke out of their stacks the whole time. It looks a little nasty, but it's also kind of like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. So you can't help but you keep watching. Okay, so here are some things, both in recent history and kind of distant history, project cars I have found on YouTube that I really want to share with you guys, and the reasons are going to become obvious as I share them with you. Let's start with this VR38 powered R34 GTR featured on Motive Video. Can't go wrong with a Motive Video. The boys over in Australia, they build some cool stuff. My main highlight or takeaway with this car is that a VR38 without an X-pipe sounds very interesting. It sounds very different compared to how a normal R35 GTR does with that kind of almost trumpety, blary sound. But if you take away that X-pipe or Y-pipe or whatever it's called on an R35 and have it just exit out the fenders, I'm assuming R35s are like this too, it sounds very different. So, that's just a neat thing to show you. Also, it's a VR38 R34 GTR. Obviously, I don't think many people would be doing that today, considering how expensive R34 GTR is now. But this was built back when R34 GTRs were like $35,000, $40,000. You know, cheap. Relatively speaking. I know for a lot of people that probably isn't cheap. Speaking about unique sounding versions of engines and way to make engines sound neat, I recently learned what 180-degree headers are, specifically on things like cross-plane V8s, and how they can basically make a bog-standard cross-plane American V8 sound like a European exotic flat-plane engine out of like a Ferrari or something. I learned about this when I was doing research for candidates on M3 GTR power plants, like all the different options out there, which there are very few. Like, here's an example. So here is an LS7 swapped 997 Porsche, which is already very interesting, with 180-degree headers. Just to be clear about this, the LS7 is the engine used in the C6 Z06 and the Z28 Camaro. The LS7, an American muscle V8. And it sounds like this. Now, I'm just going to briefly talk about this, just because it's pretty relevant today, because it's 2023. Evan Shank's R34 GTT, I'm very curious to see what he's going to do with it. A lot of GTTs have already landed in the US, most of which are cars that have already been purchased and had been stored in Japan for a little while before finally coming here and being shipped to owners. I know a lot of people have already gotten their R34 GTTs. I don't know if he's gotten his yet, but I'm very excited to see what he's going to do with it. I'm sure it's going to be very clean and cool. Another thing I found that I think is really cool, that I think fixes all the problems I have with the McLaren 720S, is this Darwin Pro body-kitted 720 GTR built by Creative Bespoke. Something like this legit makes me want to buy something like a 720S. Because my whole issue with the 720S and cars like the McLaren Senna was that I don't like the front end of the 720S because it's modeled after a shark nose and I think it looks weird. But the front end of the Senna looks cool. So you could get the GTR Senna Darwin Pro front bumper for your 720S, and then do a cool body kit for the rest of the car, and put the Senna wing on your 720S, and kind of emulate the Senna rear end, but have also the 720 taillights, which I think look better. And I think you end up having like a really cool looking car, a 720 GTR, a 720 GT1, whatever you want to call it. I think it would look really, really cool. Something that I wanted to share with you guys is That Dude in Blue's 10-speed S550 Mustang GT. He took it to national speed, where they put the VMP Odin supercharger with a couple other supporting mods on there, tuned it, and basically gave it a little over 700 wheel horsepower or something like that, or around 700 wheel horsepower on street gas, on a stock motor, basically. And I think that is super, super cool. And obviously, because it's the 10-speed, when you romp on the car, you're always going to be in boost, so it's just going to pull like a freight train. So, yeah, the Coyote motor is really a cheat code engine. It's expensive to swap into stuff, but buying a car that the engine is already in, it's an American 2J, I'm telling you. I will say, another engine that's cool is the 5.8-liter Trinity engine. And, you know, this S197 Shelby GT500 featured on That Racing channel is also very cool. I'm a really big fan of this generation of the GT500. My only gripe with it is that it's got the live axle rear end. That's not really what I want in a modern car. I'd rather have the IRS of this S550, but I wish I could swap in the 5.8-liter Trinity V8 into an S550. I think that would be much cooler in my opinion. But looking at all this stuff, you know, all these cars that are being featured on these cool channels, I wonder if I'll ever have a car that ends up being featured on one of my favorite YouTube channels, whether it gets featured on, like, That Dude in Blue's channel, That Racing channel, maybe the Smoking Tire or something like that. Maybe one day. It could be really interesting if that ever happens. Speaking of TRC, they have been building for several years now an R32 GTR. Back when they were first being brought into the country, they got theirs back when it was much, much cheaper. It's an RB30 stroker. It's got a PPG sequential transmission, Haltech, big horsepower. Like, I think it's over 1,300 wheels what they're going for. They want to run 8s or 9s or something like that because they want it to be faster than their all-wheel drive Acura RSX, which is super freaking fast. It's an amazing build. I don't know of many Skyline builds in the U.S. like it, to be honest. Going back to Evan Shanks really quick here, we talked about his AMG GT3 replica street car. That was finished, turned out amazingly, looks awesome. Builds like this are, you know, a man after my own heart is basically the phrase I would want to say for obvious reasons. I want to make my M3 and M3 GTR. I love cars that look like GT3 cars on the road. So, you know, this is super cool. And one last thing, because I know we've got a lot of OG Fast and Furious fans in the audience. Have you ever wanted to get yourself a Mitsubishi Eclipse GSX, but they're impossible to find? Well, if you don't care about authenticity and getting a genuine GSX, because that would probably be expensive and would take some patience, you could get an RS, a GS, or a GST, and you could Frankenstein it using drivetrain parts from an Evo, even swapping in the 4G63 as well. You could do this big Frankenstein swap of drivetrain and powertrain parts to make yourself an Evo GSX Eclipse.
You're swapping drivetrain components, you're swapping engines, I mean, transfer cases. Like, this is not a cold air intake install and like a downpipe. This is pretty high-level stuff.
Okay, so in these last few segments, I have mentioned a few neat things I've observed in the automotive YouTube community. But now we're going to dedicate a whole segment to just a whole bunch of things I would like to put the spotlight on for things I have seen in the automotive YouTube community, because this stuff is cool, and if you guys haven't seen it yet, it's a blast. So, starting up, we've got Amelia Hartford with her cool project cars, specifically with like replicas of old classic race cars and sports cars, like with her Ford GT40 and things like that, or the I think it's a Ferrari P4, forgive me if I'm wrong, replica car using, I think it's like a Chevy Big Block or something. It's super entertaining to see someone with her charisma and her practicality, with her familiarity with doing stuff herself, building things with her own hands, and still managing to make cool content on top of it. Like, also, you know, making a cardboard head gasket for a truck, and the replica cars, her Corvette C8 Z06, and all kinds of wild stuff. She's just a treasure for the platform, and I hope she keeps making content for a long time. A guy I recently started watching, but I wish I had been watching for a lot longer, is Weston Champlin. Now, Weston Champlin, his personality is amazing. His positivity, his energy is just contagious. The editing style is great. The production value of his videos are actually really, really good. And his projects are one of a kind. Like his turbo diesel smokestang, his supercharged 60s Dodge Charger, his burnout big block Mustang, and all of his other crazy ideas and things that he does. His twin turbo Hellcat, which is also still supercharged, despite being twin turbocharged. All of the stuff he does, and that roadkill build of his Hellcat with nitrous and stuff. He's just super entertaining. He's just super fun to watch. I've been binge watching a lot of his stuff lately, and I wish I had started watching sooner, because I haven't found anyone that makes videos like him anywhere else on the platform. I mean, not to mention, he builds things that I would not dare to build because I wouldn't know how to make it reliable. But here's the thing, he doesn't care about making it reliable. He'll spend 2 months building a car and then blow it up in one attempt to do a burnout. And you'll say, all right, that's the video. This video spanned 2 months, 4 months. We tried to build a car for some burnouts. I blew the engine. I'll see you in the next one when I have a 2,000 horsepower big block. I have not seen anything else like it anywhere. He's just a treat to watch. Now, we need to talk about Shmi real quick, because he's been driving some insanely cool cars. He recently got his Zenvo TSRS. He did a really cool video on the Pagani Utopia. And he even recently did a video where he drove Paul Walker's personal Motor X R34 GTR, his silver one, the first one he got. And some cool facts about that car. He bought that car before Too Fast and Furious started filming, and before they started casting cars for that film. And when he found out Craig Limmerman's black R34 GTR, well, actually I think it was blue by then, got casted instead of his, I think Paul was like, man, of course your car got casted. I'm pretty sure is how Craig worded it. Because I think Paul, I guess, wanted his car to be casted. He was like, I got an R34 GTR, take it, use it, I think is probably what he would have said. Something like that. That's the impression I got from all the things he said about him. That was his first R34 GTR. His other one was a white one that was a Tomei car. Now, Gintani. We got to talk about Gintani because they've been doing some really cool stuff and they need some recognition. Obviously, everyone knows about their SVJ exhaust system, and it can be used on an SV as well and a standard Aventador. But it basically makes an Aventador sound like an F1 car. It's super high-pitched, super loud, and they know how to tune it to make huge fireballs. They developed a twin-turbo kit for the Aventador V12 that retains this F1 sound. A lot of people are always very concerned that when you twin turbo a car, especially a V12 car, you really kind of lose that nice harmonic F1 sound. But they found a way to retain it and also make big power. That's super commendable considering the fact that underground racing doesn't even do that. That's a huge selling point for them. They've made that sound their signature sound, even with their twin turbo kit. I know that Daily Driven Exotics put a deposit down on their twin turbo kit to start ordering materials and parts. I know they haven't paid for it fully yet. I hope they still follow through with getting that twin turbo kit because, well, I hope they do. Right now their car is in the UK still. They had to fix the gearbox issue with it that they had to deal with during their last Gumball tour, but hopefully that still happens because, man, that would be super cool to see. Now, here's something I don't know how to feel. This is me kind of being an asshole, but I have observed that in a short span of time, within like the last year at this point, because I've been building my news playlist for a while now, that lots of people are buying and modifying and doing projects with E46 M3s, which irks me a little bit simply because I've been struggling to fund my own project. And everyone else is like, I bought an E46 M3. Or so here's some examples. Adam LZ rebuilt his. It's super clean. It's got, I think, a Turner Motorsport carbon airbox on it. His one complaint with it is that I think he made his car so loud it was hard to hear the induction sound of the airbox. So hopefully I didn't make my car too loud for my carbon airbox. Very clean car, beautiful color. Spencer Burke, one of the best channels to go to for BMW content, he got an E46 M3 as well. And then, of course, Black Panther, the Need for Speed man, got himself an M3. Well, actually, no. It was a 3 Series. But he's building it into an M3 GTR, obviously, because everyone... I'm going to be the last person to do it, even though I've been trying to figure it out for years. Since, 2016, before I even had my E46 M3. But no, it's fine. Life happens. Stuff is expensive. My mortgage got more expensive. My electric bill got more expensive. My water bill. My washing machine decided to take dishonorable suicide. Just take its own life. Ugh. Oh, it's just wonderful. But it's just kind of funny because it all happened in a short span of time. But also, I noticed another kind of mini trend that I observed, I'll call it a coincidence rather than a pattern because I haven't seen 3 YouTubers do it, but I've seen it twice, so I'll say it's a coincidence rather than once, which is a anomaly, I guess, is that Adam LZ bought back his first car, which is I think like a BMW 3 Series, and Evan Shanks bought back his first car, which was a WRX STI hatchback. And it just makes me go, man, I miss my Subaru WRX. I wish I could buy it back because I did some neat stuff to it. And I had lots of cool stuff planned for it. And honestly, with the income I have now, it's like 4 times what I was making back when I had that car. All the parts I wanted to get on it would suddenly feel so cheap to me. I would be able to finish that car. I would be able to buy all the parts for that car in like a month. the body kit, the wrap, the wheels. Oh, it's so irritating. Oh, I forgot. Shmi drove, okay, the only car that could rival the McLaren P1 HDK or the McLaren P1 LM in my heart for the best car in the world is the Koenigsegg Gira 1.1. Shmi drove the 1.1. 1 horsepower per kilogram, I think, and the car makes like 1,300 horsepower through its in-house twin-turbo V8. How do you beat that? I mean, in my opinion, the only thing that could really beat that, in my mind, is a McLaren P1 with the HDK package from Lanzante. But that's just me. Harking back to what I was talking about with the Fast and the Furious and kind of Paul Walker, loosely connected, is Craig Lieberman, in case you forgot, is a great source of information when it comes to behind-the-scenes stuff with the original Fast and the Furious films. He does lots of awesome interviews with people who originally built and owned the cars used in the films, the people who designed, like, the liveries for the cars, did special effects, or this, that, and the other, or any other kind of, like, you know, stunt driving information. All kinds of cool facts and information about these movies. He's got a whole host of videos for you to watch. And it's really, really cool to listen to. And he has lots of stories to talk about with meeting Paul Walker and his experiences with the cast and all the difficulties they had to overcome and things like that. Just all the problems they had to solve. But this is also why I stopped making Fast and the Furious videos where it was like, you know, information focus. Is that once he started making videos, because I was making them before he started, once he did it, what was the point in me doing it? Because he is what you would call, if you learned this in elementary school, which I hope you did, he is a primary source of information. He is where you go to while doing research to get the information. I am what you would call a secondary source of information. I got the information from someone else, and I am representing it in my own format. Now, I know some people might be like, you can still do that. I just don't see the point. I'd rather get it from the source, and when I was making videos, that wasn't possible. Instead, what I would do is I would make videos and, you know, exchange text messages and phone call conversations with Craig to make them, to make sure everything was accurate. But then he started making his own videos. And then I kind of stopped making Car Topics Explained. Anyways. But I might bring that back one day. Sorry, my chair is farting. And, you know, before moving on, as we get closer to the 10th anniversary of Paul's death, I just wanted to share with you, I'm sure you've seen it on, like, Instagram and things like that. Odonata made a really nice animation for, you know, Paul, where it's like this nice animation of him in his Eclipse, Dom in the RX-7. It's just kind of, you know, our equivalent of like a moment of silence for him. Just kind of remembering him, and it's just well done. So I just thought I'd share it with you. I did want to say, because I saw that my dealership had an S550 Mustang at their dealership, it sold in like a day. So I didn't really get to take a look at the interior, but the exterior of the S650 looks cool. The Dark Horse with the naturally aspirated, you know, 500 horsepower Coyote engine. I think it's the Gen 4 with the dual intakes. Looks very cool in the engine bay. That Dude in Blue did a great video on it. He's my favorite YouTuber for Mustang content. Doug DeMuro, with his super in-depth and detailed, you know, signature style of video, also did a video on the S650. It's a neat car. I'm going to miss the retro callback style interior that the S550 had. But it is what it is. But also, inversely, BMW with their modern cars are super well made, super capable, and can made to be great tuner platforms with like the G80 M3, for instance. But the front end, you know, those grills, I'm just not sure about it, but they fixed it on the 3.0 CSL, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, the limited production 3.0 CSL, it's like an homage car. Carwell did a great video on it. It's limited production. It's super friggin' expensive, so I don't really get it. But hopefully aftermarket companies can kind of replicate that front bumper for people who own ordinary M3s, because we need that. It looks great, but it is what it is. Remember that Steve Morris engine I told you about that he was building? It sounds like a first-gen Gallardo engine. It's twin-turbo, makes huge power. He was building that for Houston Crosta at Royalty Exotic Cars. for his Huracan STO. I think it was wrecked at some point, and he put it back together, and he decided not to put the wing back on, which it actually looks kind of cool. Honestly, I think it looks better without the wing, just because I don't think the stock STO wing looks good. If you put a real Super Trofeo wing on, I would actually prefer it with that, but because I haven't seen anyone do that yet, fine. No wing. Shmi affectionately called it the STO Touring, which I believe is a reference to the 911 GT3 Touring or something like that. Very clever. It looks cool, and it's probably going to be really freaking fast, and with that Steve Morris engine, it's going to sound very, very cool. Now, in case you aren't aware, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but let's talk about Lee Bird and his R34 GTT build. Possibly the best one I have seen on the platform, full stop. Alright, it's a GTR conversion, so it's got an RB30, I think it's a 3.2 liter stroker, big turbo, over 1,000 horsepower at least. I can't remember if it's like 1,200 or 1,300 or 1,100. I don't know, it's fast. It's sequential shifted. It's got a full GTR drivetrain. It's got a Haltech standalone ECU meant for an R34 GTR. It's got real, genuine R34 GTR steel quarter panels. It's got the front fenders, front bumper, and rear side skirts, all that stuff. It looks like a genuine R34 GTR. It does have GTR badges, but because of all the work he's done to make it drive like a fully built GTR, he can keep those badges. I know the VIN says otherwise, and I know a lot of purists will say, it's not a GTR. At least he doesn't have to pay the premium for the badge. He doesn't have to pay the insurance. He doesn't have to pay $150,000 for a 300 horsepower car from the 90s. So, we can't blame him. And it's a very clean car. He originally was going to paint it active red, but he ended up painting a metallic R35 GTR red. It looks so good, and it's so fast. So, yeah, he owns Monster Performance. I'm going to be sending my R34 GTT when I get one, when the M3 is done, because they're the only shop in the country I know of that even does that rear quarter panel conversion. So, I know where I'm going. But now, finally. But anyways, to end off today's episode for today's finale, let's go and watch my first time driving a supercar ever, and I'll tell you all about my experience. This is the interesting part of the episode, where I tell you my experience with Extreme Experience, also known as a company where you can get in a supercar and take it around a track for a few laps and see what it's like to be in a supercar, but also see what it's like to be in a car with a trained professional driver showing you how to actually try and push the limits of said supercar, which I've got to tell you, it's actually a lot harder to do than you'd think. So a little bit of backstory. My uncle just retired, and my father wanted to, really celebrate his retirement and, make the day as special for him as possible. And he wanted to surprise him with a day at, I think it's Worldwide Tech, sorry. Have a day Extreme Experience driving one of his dream supercars. His car being the Audi R8. And I was invited to come along, so I'm kind of glad, because I don't know if I would have been able to afford it, but I am fortunate enough to have been able to have done this. My dad also signed himself up as well. I signed up for the Lamborghini Huracan, I believe it was a 610-4, and my dad went for the 911 GT3 RS. His ultimate dream car. He said it was basically like a test drive. even though it's not very likely he will get a GT3 RS, he's probably going to get a Carrera 4S or a Targa of some kind. I hope he really enjoyed himself because, you know, he's worked plenty hard, and in my opinion, he hasn't rewarded himself near enough for all the hard work he's done. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about my experience, what it was like driving a supercar, the things that stuck out to me, and all that sort of stuff. The first step of getting to extreme experience, we had a bit of a brief class and kind of an almost classroom setting, talking about how there'll be colored cones throughout the track labeled to tell you when to brake, when to accelerate, how you're supposed to kind of aim for the cones so that it kind of guides your racing line, which I thought was really cool, being kind of told how to follow a racing line, because otherwise I didn't really know what I was doing outside of experience with Need for Speed. So this was really, really cool for me. And they also had an option which we didn't initially sign up for, but we signed up for on the spot, my dad and I, to do a ride-along with one of the professional drivers. And the driver, I really wish I could remember his name, but he was super cool. And he enjoyed talking to us about all the different technical things, about how, for instance, you want to brake before you actually start turning, and then not brake as you're going through the turn, so that you don't upset the balance of the car, which, you know, I thought that makes perfect sense. He was talking about all the different things to do with, like, you know, being gradual with the throttle, not stabbing, being, you know, purposeful with the steering and not jolting yourself around, all kinds of useful tips. And obviously, seeing someone firsthand following the racing line through the track helped a lot, because I was totally unfamiliar with this track. I knew absolutely nothing about it. But it was basically like a miniature version of Daytona, where you use some of the oval of the NASCAR track, but then you use the infield kind of track as well. And it's only 3 laps. The ride-along was not only just extra time to enjoy the experience, but it, in my opinion, was kind of allowing us to kind of mitigate the learning curve of getting dropped into a supercar and spending too much time trying to figure out what you're doing. So hopefully you can adapt faster and just enjoy yourself. That was the idea, at least in my head. And I gotta tell you, so they were all, I think it was all, I don't know if they were red-eye Hellcats, but they were Hellcats, wide-body Hellcats, Chargers, the sedans. My dad sat in the back. He volunteered to do that so that I could sit up front. And, yeah, it was really, really cool. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think I'm ever going to make fun of a Dodge Charger's handling abilities ever again, because the G's I felt that man put us through around the track were otherworldly. It was insane. And all the cool stuff he was talking about how if you wanted to get into racing, his history of driving for, I think it was like Porsche and BMW maybe even, which I thought was kind of cool. And I was saying, you know, I'd always loved, you know, I'd love to get my racing license and this, that, and the other, and, you know, just get some seat time and get better at driving, because you know, it's a skill I really value. And he said, well, oh, there goes my laptop. It's really just a matter of, you know, getting a good car to kind of tool around with, have fun on the track that's simple, reliable, and kind of built for the job. And he started listing off cars, and he started going through the list, and he said, you know, and one great car would be like, you know, an E46, 3 Series, M3, you know, those cars are great track cars. And I'm like, that's fantastic. I got one in the parking lot right now. So, you know, that was a fun moment. We talked about, I think, snap oversteer. We talked about how, you know, because the Charger's super long and some of the other cars in the fleet are long, that you don't have to worry about snap oversteer so much. But he explained it to me and my dad, and I was like, I remember hearing about this. It's like the sort of thing you could get in like a Toyota MR2 or a Lotus Elise. It just felt nice to be talking to someone credible, but be able to kind of respond to what he's saying with somewhat knowledgeable responses. And then him going, yeah, exactly. It was a nice feeling that I kind of know what I'm talking about. I wouldn't presume to be an expert. God, no. But it's nice to know I'm not clueless. So anyways, he takes us around the track. Eye-opening experience. I'll never make fun of the handling of a Charger ever again. Hell, the Challenger maybe I still will, but Charger, that was so freaking cool. But now, for the lineup, they had a lot of neat cars there. They had the 911 GT3 RS. They had Ferrari 488 GTBs, Audi R8s, R35 GTRs. I think they were standard cars. I don't think there were any Nismos. And Lamborghini Huracans. All of them, I'm pretty sure, were all-wheel drive. Nothing had carbon ceramic brakes. I even asked about that because all the brakes were squealing, and I was like, ooh, those are some really squealy brakes. I know that performance brakes are typically squealy anyways, but I was thinking about it. I'm like, I'm kind of curious. Do any of these cars have ceramic brakes? And he said, no. If we had ceramic brakes, we'd put them in a bulletproof case and hold on to them until we sold the car. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But so all of them were steel, which made sense because, we wouldn't be doing a whole lot of braking. And as I understand it, ceramic brakes, you kind of have to really heat them up in order to get your money's worth. And plus, they're freaking expensive. And giving ceramic brakes to people that have never been in a car like this before, probably not worth the risk. But I was so excited to get in the Huracan. The Huracan being one of the first supercars I ever actually liked and wanted. I've talked about this before with how Dr. M3's Purple Performante was, I think, the first Lamborghini I ever actually liked and wanted. So I was super stoked. If I remember correctly, there was I think it was a Vorsteiner Huracan in a nice baby blue. I can't remember the actual OEM color code or name from Lamborghini, but it was nice. It even had kind of a Performante style wing, and I was like, ooh, I would love to get that. But instead, I think I got a Giallo Midas Huracan instead. I'm pretty sure it would be Giallo Midas. It was yellow. So, either way, I was excited. Watching all the cars go by, my dad and I are talking about it, and I'm like, look, really, the main point of this experience is to experience the cars. I'm not really caring about being competitive. I just want to see what's so unique about these and see what makes them so expensive and special. And my dad was like, yeah, I just plan on driving like an old man, which is really kind of ironic considering he was the fastest out of all of us, and he drifted the Porsche 911 twice on accident.
Early on the gas. Good job. Thanks for not crashing.
But he went the fastest out of all three of us. I think I was actually the slowest for whatever reason. Or maybe I can't remember if I was the slowest or if it was neck and neck between me and my uncle. Where it was like he was going 120 something, I was going like maybe a mile an hour faster. But my dad was faster than us by almost 10 miles an hour on the straightaway. I was braking later than everyone else, but I don't know if that was really doing me any good. Because my instructor, when I was finally in the car, and he was super cool too. All of these people were super cool. He was always telling me, power, 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 power. And I was just not getting on it.
Add a little power here. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit. A little bit of power. Doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing great.
Add a little power here, Tom. Start squeezing it. You got to listen here.
And we weren't allowed to manually shift the cars, honestly, for obvious reasons. And the Huracan's dual clutch transmission, I guess, was programmed kind of like how a normal gearbox is, where it really only will drop the necessary amount of gears to go fast if you give it enough throttle. And because I was being gentle, the car just thought I was trying to cruise. So I always have to be like, oh, I need to go faster, I need to go faster. And the reason why I was struggling with that is because I had never driven a car where I knew it could handle as well as that car did. Because all of the corners on that track, I would be willing to do them in my E46 M3 at maybe 50, 60 miles an hour with my experience level. With the same experience level, but in a Lamborghini Huracan, I was doing those same corners at 90. The handling of the Lamborghini Huracan was more mind-blowing than any other aspect of the car. The horsepower, it was so linear I didn't really notice it. The gearbox, which I really was wanting to pay attention to, I didn't notice it at all. It was my first dual clutch transmission, and it was so smooth, and I think I was so enamored with everything that I just didn't even notice the shifts. I did notice that it was annoying trying to get it down a few gears so that I could go faster. I had to really, give it more throttle than I was initially comfortable with. Power, 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 power. But the main thing that blew my mind wasn't the power or the brakes or anything. It was just being able to carry insane speeds through the corners and the car just sticking to the road like it was on rails or a roller coaster, or it was glued. I couldn't explain it. Other than that, it actually felt like I was breaking physics. I had never driven anything that could handle like that before. So that was the eye-opening part of the whole experience for me. Yes, I mean, getting in the car was really, really cool. Driving an actual Lamborghini, that was awesome. Seeing the gauge cluster, obviously we were in Strata. We didn't get to go into Corsa or anything like that. I think Strata is the lowest setting. But seeing, the display in the gauge cluster, I think I've just gotten desensitized by YouTube, because when I got in that Lamborghini, even though it was just the standard Huracan, from 2015, it still felt really special. Seeing all the switches, the start button that looked like a fighter jet switch, it was all super cool and super special. It was kind of funny. For one thing, the steering wheel felt super small. The steering felt really light, but that might have also been because of the driving mode, because it might have been electronically assisted. I can't remember the specs of these cars. But I remember it feeling really small and really low down, which makes sense. But then because I had a helmet on, my head barely cleared the roof. So if I wanted to use a Huracan as like a professional race car, I would probably have to figure out a custom mount system for my seat to lower it down and get it in the right position so that I don't have, a bad amount of angle in my legs and this, that, and the other. So that part wasn't ideal, but that's because I'm 5'11" or whatever it is, or 5'12", whatever we say in North America. But yeah, I didn't get to use launch control. I didn't get to downshift or anything like that. I really wish I could have, just to see what it felt like. I'm pretty sure I had the stock or sport exhaust on the car, so it wasn't super, super loud. It didn't have the body kit or anything like that, but I had so much fun. I would recommend it to anyone. And if you are going to do it, do the ride-along as well, because you only get 3 laps. And it's over like that, for obvious reasons. These cars are fast. Yeah, if you don't do it, and you don't plan on buying one of these cars, but you're curious, save up the money, give it a try, see where the locations are. They have other events, too, where you can just drive the car on the road and go for a cruise, and it can be just you and someone else. Not even a professional driver. It would be like going on a rally in someone else's car. That's something else they offer as well. It's I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, obviously they give you the footage. You can sign up for the footage to be saved so that I've got everyone's footage, my dad's, my uncle's, mine. They take a picture of you. It's super freaking cool, man. And it really did for me, even though I didn't tell my dad this, because I'm not in the same financial situation as him, because if he wanted to, he could buy a Huracan or a 911 GT3 or whatever. But he doesn't really want to as well. He wants something more like a 4S. Whereas I'm like, yeah, I'll be honest, even though it's a little early, I definitely don't have the money for it, but driving this Huracan was like my kind of test drive. Because the other curiosity that I had was because YouTube desensitizes you to so much crap. Where you just think, oh, if it's not the latest and greatest, at least for me, am I actually going to like it? Is it worth, even saving a couple $100,000 getting a base model? Am I going to feel like I'm missing out by not getting a Performante or an STO? I don't think I would feel like that. Even without the rear wheel steering, that car hooked. And, I mean, it would be incredible for me to be able to say, I have the driving skill to take advantage of the minor tweaks they made with the rear wheel steering and the modern, latest examples of the Huracan, but I don't have that kind of skill level, so I can't take advantage of that. So the standard all-wheel drive Huracan is perfect for me. It's perfect. It was so cool. And obviously the R8 and the Porsche were all super cool. My uncle was more kind of impressed with the horsepower, which I thought was interesting, rather than the handling. I couldn't explain why, but I mean, I've been in fast cars before. I've been in cars faster than that Huracan before, but mostly as passengers. More to the point, maybe I was just more used to it. Maybe it was because of how linear the power was, you know, NA power. But the handling was what blew my mind. And that's just my main takeaway. And also kind of, you know, pretending to know what a racing line is was also really fun. So yeah. Anyways, that is episode 3 of the Ice Age. I would like to thank you all for joining us today, tonight, tomorrow, yesterday, next year. Whatever it is you're doing, in whatever dimension, it doesn't matter. As long as you enjoyed the video and the episode, that's enough for me. Anyways, I'm Tom Wood, aka TheRacingJoker. This has been the Ice Age, and I'll see you next time. Good night.